And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, March 12th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain, and most of the time the stories we read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. But today we go to Anchorage, Alaska, and talk with one of our favorite correspondents there, Lori Townsend of the Alaska Public Radio Network. Lori Townsend, thanks for joining with us again on the Native News Update from Anchorage, Alaska. Would you give us a little bit of an update of some of the things that are happening way over there up in the North Country of Alaska, and especially with those things that are impacting Native populations?
Well, hi, Paul. Yes, I'd be happy to do that. As you probably are aware, we're in the midst of the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race right now. It's an annual enormous event here, and it's in the 40th running this year of the Iditarod Race. Last year, you may remember that John Baker, who is Alaska Native from Kotzebue area, won the race. He set a record-breaking pace, and he is back racing again this year. There's 4 Alaska Native people in the race this year. We've got John, who is, let's see, John, he's currently in 5th place. He's bib number 11 for people who want to track the mushers that way.
Which Johnny? And Johnny Baker or Cadzo?
No, John Baker.
Okay.
John Baker, yep. Bib 11, he's in 5th place. Currently, he's into Koyuk, and as you'll see if you look at the map of the trail, there's a southern route and then there's a northern route, and they went the northern route this year. So he's into Koyuk, and I can hold this up here. I don't know if you can really see that very well,
yeah. But I can see a little bit. We'll put it up there. But in other words, do they change it every other year? Or do they change it depending on track conditions, or why would they change it?
Every other year, they change it from the northern route to the southern route. And so this year, it's the northern trek. They don't go through the old ghost town of Iditarod or Flat, those areas that the trail goes to on the southern route. So they're going the northern route this year. Before the race started, the race officials had decided they were going to take this place out called the Happy River Steps, which can be very treacherous. Lots of people crash, bust up their sleds, and get hurt. And they decided not to do that this year. And it was very controversial because a lot of mushers, seasoned veterans, were saying, well, that's kind of where it's one of those places where you can separate out people who are prepared and people who aren't. But they ended up putting them back in there because the alternative mining road that they were going to use wasn't in good condition. So they put the steps back in. And because we've had so much snow here, as I'm sure you know, they were okay. The steps were all right, and people kind of glided down them, it sounds like. I'm sure it wasn't that way for people who came later in the race, but the first few people through there said it was quite easy. So in addition to John Baker, we've got a rookie who just scratched, Josh Kadzow, bib 55, 23 years old, Athabascan from Fort Yukon, and he scratched.
Okay, what's a scratch?
That means that something happened and he had to leave the race.
Okay.
And I'm not sure why he scratched, but he is out now. Pete Kaiser is Yupik from Bethel. He's bib number 28. He's into Koyuk, and Pete could actually be in the top 5 finishers. And so he's doing real well. And Mike Williams Jr. from Akiak. He's currently in 12th place. He's bib 51. He's into Shaktoolik. And his father, Mike Williams Sr., ran for many years on a theme of supporting sobriety. That's a big push for Mike Williams Sr. And his son isn't really taking that mantle up. He hasn't talked about it, at least not yet. He's just kind of running under his own plans right now. But I know that he supports those efforts of his dad. And so those are the 4 Alaska Natives that are in the race. And so far, only one is scratched.
Okay. Ask a couple questions. What can you tell me about how this was established? Was there someone who used to do a mail run, for example, the Bear Grease run from Duluth, Minnesota up to Thunder Bay was a mail route at one point. What do we know about the old mining town of Iditarod, and why have they established this? Is it just out of tradition, fun sport?
Well, it actually started in the early 70s with Ray Reddington Sr. and Dan Seavey had the idea to to retrace the route of the serum run that was made in the 1920s when they couldn't get to Nome and people were dying, and so they took the serum as far as they could on the train and then took dog teams, and it took weeks of kind of this relay race of getting the serum to Nome. But now and so that happened in the 20s, and then the trail kind of got forgotten about after the war, after the gold rush was done and the war started. Metal had to be used for other things, so they disassembled dredges out at Iditarod and Flat, and the trail kind of fell into disrepair as far as the entire length of it. People still use portions of it for travel in between communities. But then in the early 70s, there was this idea of reinstituting a race. And if you talk to Dan Seavey today, who is in his 70s and is running the race right now, which is amazing to me. There's 3 generations of Seaveys running this year, and Dallas could possibly win. He's first out of he's in Koyuk right now, and actually he left Koyuk, so he's on his way to Elam, and behind him is Ali Zirkle. And Dallas could win it. And so I think it's really amazing that there's 3 generations of these guys on the trail. And so that's how the race started up again. And Dan Seavey said he never thought it would last as long as it has. But here we are 40 years later.
Sometimes they take off and get bigger and bigger. Tell me a little bit about what you know about how the race sequence. These guys don't all start out at once and out-compete each other that way, do they? Or do they start all together, or is it a staggered time kind of a thing where there is resting periods and all that? Talk a little bit about how that form takes place.
Yes, they take off in a staggered race start, and then there are required rest periods along the trail. They have to take a 24-hour rest. Now when they get to White Mountain, which is one of the last stops before they get to Nome, it's White Mountain, then Safety, and then Nome, they have to take an 8-hour rest at White Mountain. So right now, for instance, Dallas Seavey, Ali Zirkle have left Koyuk, and John Baker and some others are into Koyuk, and they're on their way now to White Mountain. But whenever someone gets there, even if someone left now and got to White Mountain, they have to wait for 8 hours there. So there are mandatory rests that have to be taken. And so there's, still a lot that could happen. One of the things that was interesting about this race this year is last year some of the teams were plagued by kennel cough, and that was kind of an issue. This year, there's been a couple of dog teams. Mitch Seavey's team had bad stomach trouble along the trail, and he had a lot of trouble with them. And Jeff King, 4-time Iditarod champion, his dogs just laid down outside of Unalakleet and wouldn't go. They had some kind of stomach trouble, and they just wouldn't race anymore. And so all the training can fall apart if something like that happens. We had another musher who got a fever on the trail. He was quite sick. He's doing better now. And Aaron Burmeister, in fact, he's into Koyuk. And another musher that cut his hand real bad. He was cutting fish for the dogs to snack the dogs along the trail, and ended up slicing his hand open, and he was forced to withdraw because he needed stitches, and the race official said, look, you're just going to have to get out of the race. So things happen. It's a tough race.
Things that you never prepared for, like an accidental slicing of the thumb or whatever when you're feeding your dogs. Is the layover a safety issue for the mushers, or is it for the dogs and ultimately the mushers? If you got tired dogs, things can happen as well where they're not going to be able to do what they need to do. What's the intent of those layovers?
Oh, it's absolutely to rest both the mushers and their dogs. And even then, of course, they're exhausted. Mushers hallucinate from lack of sleep out on the trail. They can take wrong turns out there. It's not like this is some highway out in the wilderness. And so when it's dark or foggy or storming, they can get lost. Now they all have GPS units on them, so it's not quite as serious or scary as being lost might have once been. But the rests are to make sure that the dogs get to Nome safely and healthy, and so do the mushers. There's a lot of scrutiny about these kinds of events, and animal rights organizations don't like it. And so there's a lot of care that goes into making sure that these dogs are in good shape. They all have to be vet checked at the stops. And if there's anything wrong, they make them drop the dogs. And the mushers want them healthy as well. They love their dogs. They take very, very good care of them. And if they see a dog that's limping or having trouble, they'll put them in the sled and ride them into the next checkpoint and drop them off there. So there's a lot of care that goes into taking care of the dogs and the mushers. They need to stop and rest. They get good meals at the villages. People put on a great spread for them there. It's kind of like a festival at these stops for a lot of people.
Talking about the safety for the dogs and other things, just how long is this race in terms of kilometers or miles, and how many days does it take?
It's 1,000 miles from the official start in Willow to Nome. It's about 1,000 miles, and 1,049, some people say. And now the race takes about 8 days or so. You know, in years past, it would take weeks. And now the finishers will be into Nome probably sometime tomorrow. The top finishers will be into Nome.
Okay. Are all the dogs used Malumets or something like that? Are they specialty dogs? Are those dogs really diverse in terms of the kind of dogs that are being used?
They're pretty diverse, and there's, I don't know a lot about the breeds. Mushers have their own bloodlines,
right.
And most of the dogs are quite small. People that haven't seen the race before would really be surprised at the size of the dogs, because most of them are small. John Baker has a team of quite large dogs, but most of the dogs that run the Iditarod are small, mixed breed dogs. And some of the mushers run kennel dogs. They'll go get pound dogs, and some of them look like racers, and some of them don't. And they take them out and put them on the harness and teach them how to race and take them out on the trail.
Well, I got my view of what a bunch of mushing dogs ought to look like. So if there was a beagle in the mix, that'd be a little bit different. But okay, well, let's watch.
I haven't seen any of those.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that. We'll announce the winner here. We won't have the news tomorrow, but maybe the next day, because we're going to do a live stream of the State of the Tribes event down in Madison, Wisconsin tomorrow. But you have about a minute left. Tell us where this redistricting situation is, or the moratorium you were talking about. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, what it is, Paul, is the Federal Subsistence Board has put a stay on the redesignation of some small communities. There's a rural, non-rural status that gets applied to communities. For instance, Anchorage, of course, being a large city, there aren't rural subsistence rights here for people who live in the city. Those are reserved for folks in small communities or out in the country. There were some communities that, because of population changes, they were going to lose their rural designation, and folks were very, very concerned about that because they rely on that so much to help supplement their year's food supply. Right. And so they've put a stay on that. They want those decisions revisited, and that decision that was supposed to be in effect in May of this year is now on hold for 5 years. So they'll be reevaluating that. So those people kind of have a reprieve and will maintain their rural status now.
Okay, sounds good. We're going to have to finish up with that. Thanks for joining with us again, and you take care. We'll catch up with you again on the trail. How high is your snow?
We are about 4 inches from breaking the record here in Anchorage. We have about 126 inches right now, and the record's 132.
126 inches of snow.
About 6 inches away, I guess.
You can have it. You can have it. Thanks. We got summer coming down here. 70 degrees tomorrow or the next day.
Oh boy.
So take care, Lori.
Bye.
And save tomorrow's date on Tuesday, March 13th for the Wisconsin State of the Tribes address in Madison, Wisconsin, where we're going to bring you the keynote speaker there in the Wisconsin Assembly, John Greendeer of the Ho-Chunk Nation. And that is another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. Want to thank you for joining with us by saying miigwech, wan, and pinagigi, and come back again soon.